Please remain standing as I read from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, that I too may come and worship him. After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated.
This year for Christmas, what are you hoping to get?
A computer. Big, giant Barbie house.
A trophy case.
Xbox 360. Minecraft Legos.
What do you think your mom or dad want for Christmas?
My mom would probably want a ring. She's never really had a ring.
Jewelry. She loves jewelry. A new TV. Like watches.
So, we actually did buy an Xbox 360.
What in the world? I wanted this! Okay, you really got this for me?
A new laptop.
Wow.
And
It's a necklace.
So we also bought a necklace because you said you also wanted to get a necklace for your mom or your auntie. The catch is that you can either get a gift for yourself, or you can pick a gift for your mom and dad. I need you to pick one. Now before you answer, oh, I bet that's hard. Is that a really hard question?
Mm-hmm.
What gift do you pick?
I choose this.
I gotta go with the ring.
What gift do you pick?
That one. That one. That dress.
I'll choose this for my mom.
I'll choose this one.
It's a really tough question,
I'll
but
give him this
you already know? Tell me why.
because Legos don't matter. Your family matters. Not Legos, not toys, your family. So it's either family or Legos, and I choose family.
I get gifts every year from my family, and my mom don't get anything. If I get a laptop, my mom will get something. She helps me when I'm sick. She helps me with my homework. She gave me a house to live in.
They look out for me and do stuff for me, so I need to give back to them.
Now I have the opportunity to give him something.
Because you actually picked the gift for your family, you're actually gonna go home with both. Tell me how you're feeling.
I'm feeling really happy and thankful.
Just happy. Thankful.
For your family? For what?
My family, everything.
He did make his decision, actually. And he picked the Pandora charms.
Oh, that is sweet. You're gonna make me cry. So where you putting the thing? In your room. Oh, it's for me? Oh, it's so cute.
Thanks, guys.
I was going to.
Over and over in the Bible, we are pointed to something that God has woven into the fabric of the universe. Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden. They step over God's line in the sand, and they do the one thing that they were charged not to do. And now there is division, there's separation between them and God, and what in the world is going to fix that? And so God brings in an animal. God kills it and uses its skin to cover what Adam and Eve had their eyes opened to. Yes, nakedness, but more so their guilt and their shame. And so God covers their sin in the only way it can be covered, through the shedding of blood. Much, much later, the writer of Hebrews will explain this to us. He will say that without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin. It's the shedding of blood to cover sin of the first two humans in the garden, and by that act, God writes into the pages of time this one idea. Here's the idea: sacrifice. Sacrifice. And from that point on in the garden, sacrifice becomes necessary to repair the relational divide that happens when we sin. And so, since God was the first to provide a sacrifice for sin, guess what? He gets to call the shots about the kind of sacrifices that are acceptable to cover sin. And as you track through the Old Testament, there are some specifics that God asks for when it comes to these kind of sacrifices. I want to show you a few things about sacrifices from the Old Testament to start out today. First, sacrifices had to be the first. In Exodus chapter 34, God says, "All that open the womb are mine, all your male livestock, the firstborn of cow and sheep." And the context of this passage is sacrifice, and God asks his people to sacrifice to him the first of what they have. The firstborn of the livestock, God says, "Give me first as the sacrifice." And the long story short here is, why in the world would God ask for the first of what we have? And here's one of the reasons that that's the case. The first of what I have reveals where my heart is. If you want to find out where your allegiances lie, where you go to for comfort or love or identity, just pay attention to the firsts in your life, okay? So here's an example of that. Oh man, it's been a really bad day. Fine. You get home after that really bad day. What's the first thing that you do? That will tell you where you might be looking for real comfort, for real relief, for real love. Here's another. Maybe today is not the worst day. Today is the best day. Oh my goodness, I'll remember today forever. Great experiences, great news, great people. Okay, perfect. What's the first thing you do at the end of that great day? Pay attention to the firsts in your life, and just like a compass needle, they will point you to the things that you treasure most. More than anything, God wants our heart, and so he points out our firsts, and he says, "Give me those." Here's the second thing about sacrifices that we find in the Old Testament. Sacrifices had to be flawless. God requires sacrifices to be perfect, without blemish, without imperfection. Leviticus 1 says, if his gift for a burnt offering is from the flock, from the sheep or goats, he shall bring a male without blemish. Leviticus 5 says, he shall bring to the priest a ram without blemish out of the flock, or its equivalent, for a guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him for the mistake he made unintentionally, and he shall be forgiven. Margaret Feinberg is the author of a book entitled Scouting the Divine, and in order to write a certain chapter, she went and she spent some time with a shepherdess who raises sheep. And that shepherdess told her that if shepherds are very careful with their breeding programs, then lambs will be produced out of their flock with the finest fleece. And that's the goal of raising lambs for wool, to get the finest fleece possible, the fleece that is flawless. Now, what makes it that way? She said, the best fleece is consistent from head to tail. and it's rich in color, and it doesn't have any patches of coarse wool or unwanted spots. And in order to get a fleece like that, shepherds are always minimizing the defects in their sheep. And so they're constantly examining the development of their sheep, their legs, their body, their teeth. To eat well, you have to have good teeth, right? And whatever defects there may be, they affect the end product. And so when God asks for the flawless without blemish, what he's asking for is the best. Give me the best. It's the best of the flock. It's the one with the finest fleece who flosses the most, right? The top blue winner at the fair. That's what God asks for. And the shepherdess was quick to tell Feinberg that this perfect, one-of-a-kind, best of the flock kind of super sheep takes years and years to produce. And so understand what God is asking here. Maybe you're a shepherd and you struggle, and you season after season, year after year, you're working hard, struggling to create that perfect, flawless sheep, all that work so that it can then be just handed over to God and sacrificed. And you'll never get it back. And that leads us to the last important thing about sacrifices that we find in the Old Testament is sacrifices must be given fully. A sacrifice given as intended means that once given, it becomes irretrievable. It's lost to the giver forever. It's given fully. I want you to listen for it. In Deuteronomy chapter 18, it says this: the first fruits of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil, and the first fleece of your sheep, you shall, what's the word? Give. In this text, God is asking for the first shearing of the sheep, the first fleece. And maybe a good equivalent here is to think back to your first haircut. Anybody's parents, mom, dad, save some hair from your first haircut? No. Okay. Did you save some hair from your first haircut? Some people do that. I don't know if they saved the hair, but my granddaughter Arlie decided to give herself a haircut twice. It came with obvious consequences. In the sheep world, okay, the first shearing is special because it only happens once. It only happens once. There's only one first time to shear a sheep. And that first shearing is the finest fleece that you'll ever get from that sheep. The wool makes the best clothes. It's not itchy or scratchy. Everybody wants this kind of wool next to their skin. And so the first shearing is also the smallest, because that makes sense, right? Because of the size of the sheep when it happens. And not surprisingly, this first shearing also holds then the most value. Every shearing after the first decreases in value. And so God here is asking for the finest, the rarest, the costliest, and on top of it all, he's asking for something that once given will never be recovered. There's only one first, right? You can never get that back. The very word sacrifice means slaughter. It means to obliterate. It means to annihilate. It means to exterminate. It means complete destruction. And so any animal that is sacrificed to God, any harvest that is sacrificed, it inherently means that the life will be lost, that the produce will be lost, that any sustenance, any gain, any value you might have had is lost, and it's lost forever, and it will never be recovered. Here's the TLDR of the Old Testament sacrifices. God asks for the first, he asks for the flawless, and he asks for the sacrifice to be given fully. Whenever Scripture talks about sacrifice, it's a pattern for people then to jump up and say, I don't think so. They begin a critique of God. How dare he ask for these kind of things from us? Like, how dare he ask us to cut down life in this way? This must not be a very good God if he's asking some barbaric sacrifice like this. I don't know that I can worship a God like that. And what needs to be understood is that God is only asking for our sacrifices to be the same as his. Go back to the garden. The sacrifice he made there was the first killing ever. The first killing in a perfect world. We could say that there was no sin, there was no blemish. And so that animal that he picked was a perfect animal that God himself had formed, had fashioned, had made. God willingly offered up this animal's life to be lost, never to be recovered again, and he gave fully so that human sin could be covered. And in doing so, he gave us really the central theme of the Bible. It is this: the perfect laying down its life on behalf of the imperfect. That's the theme of the Bible. The perfect laying down its life on behalf of the imperfect. Sacrifice is a spiritual reality begun by God himself. This Christmas season, we are looking at this phrase that Matthew writes for us in chapter 1 of his gospel. They shall call his name Immanuel, which means, say it with me, God with us, right? God with us. And that's a reality that will never change. God will always be with us. And today I want you to show you again yet another reason why that's true, that God will always be with us. Matthew's main purpose in writing his whole gospel is to show his Jewish audience, that's who he's writing to, a very Jewish audience, and he wants to show them that Jesus is the king. And so in our text today, he includes this story about how King Herod, who is not really the king anymore, attempts to keep the throne that wasn't really his to begin with. It's not accidental that Matthew writes about wise men who happen into Jerusalem. And we don't know how many there are. Tradition tells us there's 3 because of the gifts, and we'll get to that in a second. But it's likely that there was a whole company of these wise men, these wise guys, because all of Jerusalem, he says, was stirred up. And I'm not sure how just 3 guys stir up all of Jerusalem. So there's probably a lot more. And despite their number, they bolt into town and they say this: we've seen a star, we understand that it means that there's a new king in town, and we have come to worship him. And so the wise men are led on this journey to a king. They are not led just to a place, Jerusalem. They are not led to King Herod. They are not led to the scriptures. They're not led to a place called Bethlehem. They are intentionally led, listen to it, to a ruler. We are here to worship the King of the Jews. Herod, who is the king, hears this, and I want you to think about that, because they're basically saying, they're rolling into town, they're saying, Herod, you're not really the king. Where is the real king of the Jews? And I'm not sure that that's a great way to greet a monarch, right? And Herod kind of says, another king. Well, I won't send you to the pit of misery right away. I'll entertain you for a minute. I'll play along just for a second. And he calls his chief priests and his scribes together, and he asks them about what the wise men are saying. And they say, oh, yeah, there's a prophet in the Old Testament named Micah, and he spoke about that. The prophet says the king will be born in Bethlehem, and it says also that a ruler will come from Bethlehem, and that this ruler will be a shepherd for the people of Israel. And with that line from the prophet Micah, Matthew points out that not only is Jesus king, but he's a certain kind of king. He's a shepherd king. Herod has his own motives, but outwardly he tells this company of wise men, I want you to go, I want you to try to find this child so that I may worship him. He didn't really mean it. But the wise men go, they continue their search, a star guides them to where the child is, and when they arrive in front of the shepherd king, they do something that is very customary to do whenever you hold an audience with a king. The custom is to bring a gift. Matthew is sly in the way that he writes this and explains it. His purpose, remember, is to show that Jesus is the only king worthy of our allegiance. And these wise men follow custom, and they bring gifts to the king. But they were just in front of a king, right? King Herod. And no doubt they also would have followed custom and brought King Herod gifts too, because after all, he was the king of the day. He was royalty. But does Matthew write about that? No. He makes no mention of any gifts to King Herod. It's just not in there. But Jesus, oh, Matthew is quick to tell us about the gifts that these wise men brought for him. Why? Because he's the true king. He's the only one worthy of everything that we can give him. And so the wise men follow the custom of giving gifts when it counts most. They're in front of not just any king, but the King of Kings, and they give their sacrifices to Jesus the King. They give what is valuable and fitting for a king. And we've kind of talked about sacrifices here. Let's talk about gifts just for a second, because I want to show you how the two go together. Sacrifice is echoed in the giving of gifts. Have you ever considered why we give gifts? Like, why do we do that for each other? Not just at Christmas time, but at any time at all. Why do we give gifts? There was a kid who got a present under the tree that didn't have a tag on it to know who it was from. And he exclaimed, "I'm pretty sure it's from Kanye West." And his parents said, what are you coming up with that? Like, how in the world do you think that? It could be from Santa. And the kid said, "No, it's from Kanye, I'm sure. It's bad rapping." Is anybody else terrible at rapping? And also covering boxes with pretty paper? Yes. Why? Why do we do that? Why do we give badly wrapped gifts to each other? Here's the answer. Gifts are the echo of the sacrificial system that God himself began. God sacrifices an animal to make Adam and Eve right with him again. And after that, he sets up an entire sacrificial system in the Old Testament to make his people right with him whenever they sin. And so the purpose of sacrifice is to make a relationship right again. And I want you to think about why you gave gifts or are going to give gifts to those people in your life this season. A gift is a small sacrifice, is it not? That card, those tickets, that money, the gadget, the toy, they're all little sacrifices on our part, and we sacrifice and we give gifts in order to communicate to somebody else, you mean something to me. You're special to me. I want this relationship to continue to be right. You're a person that I love, and I want to keep it that way. And so we give gifts in order to be right with someone else. And these wise men come in and they bow down and they know they need to be right with the true king. And this king is the king whose throne will never end. And so they worship him and they fall at his feet and they give him gifts, little sacrifices. Matthew writes that they gave him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And giving these things is the way that they say to Jesus, "We want to be right with you." Even the words Matthew uses here, he writes, they offered gifts. In verse 11, he uses the language of sacrifice to a god. That's what that phrase was intended for, a sacrifice to a god. And here they're sacrificing to the true God. He writes that the wise men opened their treasures. It means that the prizes, the gifts that they gave were prized possessions of first importance. I'm sure that they were flawless. And I'm sure that they were given fully and considered absolutely lost once that they were given. They were given to be right with this king whose throne would last forever. The custom of the day for those bowing in front of royalty was to bring a gift. It was to bring a sacrifice. And so that's what the wise men do, to be right with the King of all kings. But it was also custom in that day, if you entertained and had an audience with a king, the king also had this custom of reciprocating a gift to the person who had just given one. And so now the twist here is that Jesus does exactly that for these wise men. Jesus does exactly that for us. Even from the manger, Jesus is giving, he's reciprocating to us. I want you to look at what Jesus, the one true King of all time and space, gives to you, gives to me. Scripture calls Jesus the firstborn. Luke chapter 2, she gave birth to her firstborn. Romans 8, he is the firstborn among many brothers. Colossians 1, he is called the firstborn of creation. Colossians 1 and Revelation 1, he is the firstborn from among the dead. Hebrews chapter 1, he is God's firstborn son. He is the first. Scripture tells us, second, that Jesus is flawless. He is perfect. Even his closest friends will write and tell us this. What would your closest friend say about you? Probably not that. 2 Corinthians 5, for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin. 1 Peter 2, he committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. Hebrews chapter 4, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who was in every respect tempted as we are, yet without sin. 1 John 3, you know that he appeared in order to take away sin, and in him there is no sin. Then finally, the scripture tells us that Jesus gives fully. He gave a first shearing kind of gift. He gave something that once it is given, it can never be regained. I'm going to read a couple of scriptures. They're on the screen. I want you to see if you can see what it is. Philippians chapter 2 says, Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Here's Hebrews chapter 2. Since, therefore, the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil. Therefore, he had to be made like his brothers in every respect. What do both of those texts point to? Here it is, that Jesus became human. And there it is. There's the gift. Jesus gives up something that can never be regained. It's a status that can never be recovered. He loses it forever. Before he left heaven to become a man, he was known as only and fully God. But his status as only God is no longer the case. Why? Because he came in the flesh. He became human, and now he will be like us forever. In the timelessness of eternity, Jesus will be fully God, but also at the very same time, he will always and forever be fully human, just like us. He will never go back to the way he was as only God, and he lost that status. He gave it fully for us. The gift of the true king to the wise men and to all who follow is the greatest anyone could ever give. He gave the gift of himself. He sacrifices himself, even from the very beginning. There's a great short story, I know you've heard it, by O. Henry, and explains that Della and Jim lived in a little flat that they could barely afford. They had two things that they owned that they were proud of. Della, her prized possession is her long, beautiful, flowing hair. And Jim has a lone treasure as well. It is his pocket watch given to him by his father that was given to him by his father. And Christmas is coming, and they both love each other so much they want to give gifts to each other, but they have zero money. And so you have to read the story, right? Della cuts off of her long hair, and she sells her hair so that she can buy a chain, a gold chain, for Jim's pocket watch. And at the same time, Jim goes and sells his pocket watch. And he uses the money to buy tortoiseshell combs that are perfect for Della's long, beautiful hair. And O. Henry finishes the story with these words. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, because possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat, who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasure of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. And of all who give and receive gifts such as they are the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi. You've heard it said, wise men still seek him. The thing is, that doesn't go far enough. It's true. But the seeking needs to lead somewhere. And if it's true seeking, that seeking will always lead to sacrifice. Jesus gives the gift of himself. He gave everything, and so now he gives everything as well. And we respond by giving. And when we do, the world works as it should. What do you have to sacrifice today? What pocket watch? What long waterfall of flowing hair? What resources? What talent? What words? What power? What opinions? What influence? What time? What do you have to give? Whatever it is, give the first, give the flawless, and give fully. So that even if it's lost forever, never to be recovered, that's okay, because what you might lose will never outweigh what you will gain. God, would you help us to see today the great sacrifice of Jesus for us? He gave up heaven for us. He gave us up status for us. He gave up his perfection for us. And he gave it all fully in his great love for us. Would you help us to see that sacrifice? Would you help us to understand that to give is the best thing we could ever do? And so let us give ourselves to the King. And we ask this in the name of the baby in the manger, who is called Immanuel, God with us. And everybody said, amen. Would you stand? Let's sing today.